Greetings, friends and family. I'm excited to be here. Those who've been following this channel for a little bit may recognize this background. It just means I'm not at home. I'm at the family house, at my stepmom's house. I'm usually here on vacations over the summer and whatnot, and I come over here and I refresh a little bit. So I'm watching the World Cup while I'm over here. I just wanted to get on real quick and see if I can do a abridged version, at least compared to the other videos that I typically do, that talks about the African teams at the World Cup and just one interesting fact about each nation. The World Cup has been so much fun. This has been a better start for Africa than most. As I'm recording this right now, it just went 3 p.m. I don't know why I started this late. It's 3 p.m. and that's when the Senegal-France game begins. One of the games that's predicted to be the game of the first round. And so I'm going to try to get this done in the next 20 minutes so I can watch the rest of the game. But if you remember, in recent years, Africa has had very slow starts to the World Cup. Even last time in 2018, we didn't even have a single team in the second round. But this time, there's been some very good performances. Chief among them, Ivory Coast, beating Ecuador 1-0. We had Cape Verde with a majestic performance at their first time of trying, drawing 0-0 with the mighty Spain, who are European champions. We saw Egypt and Belgium go 1-1. The less said about Tunisia, the better at this stage. But Morocco went up toe-to-toe with Brazil, the most successful in the history of the World Cup. And they drew 1-1. So we're going to watch Senegal now. Who else still hasn't played? Senegal hasn't played yet. Ghana hasn't played. Algeria plays tonight. Senegal, Algeria, Ghana, and the Congo. At least those four. If I'm forgetting the other one, I'll catch it as I'm going through my list here. So what do I want to do today? I'm just going to go through the list of the 10 African countries, then maybe add 3 or 4 more that are relevant to the Pan-African community at the end, just to talk about 1 or 2 things that are interesting about them. So the facts I'm stating here are not necessarily about soccer. In fact, very few of them will be about soccer directly. What is the build-up might be about soccer, but the fact that I'm stating that is not going to be necessarily about football. So if you allow me, I'll go ahead and get started here. I have my list. So these are 10 fascinating facts about Africa's representatives at the World Cup this year. All right. The first country we have on here is Algeria. Algeria is a remarkable team, right, historically. Right now I'm not necessarily talking about their prospects in this World Cup because we've done that before. But I am, however, talking about just their pedigree as a national team historically and also just as a country. So what's interesting about Algeria? Well, Algeria, you already know Algeria, man. They made it to the second round of the World Cup in 2014. First time that they've had 2 teams in the knockout stages of the World Cup. Algeria is also just the biggest country in Africa right now. Straight out the biggest. Algeria is the biggest country in Africa right now. For a long time it was Sudan, but since Sudan split into South Sudan and Sudan in 2011, Algeria became outright the biggest country in Africa. Something else that you may also be interested in is Catholic Saint Augustine of Hippo, right? St. Augustine, who is widely regarded as one of the most influential philosophers in the history of the Western world, and is viewed as one of the most important church fathers in the first few hundred years of the Christian church. He was from Algeria. Hippo is a place in Algeria. So that's Algeria. They haven't played yet. We look forward to seeing what they do. Next up, speak Cape Verde, right? Who put up again a massive performance yesterday. In fact, their goalkeeper Vozinha, I think he had maybe like 60,000 Instagram followers before the game. By the end of it, I checked. Well, by the end of day, he was up to 4.6 million. When you consider that the population of this country is like 500,000, that is 8 times, at least at the time of checking, by end of day yesterday, the size of their population. So just an incredible, masterful performance to do 0-0. And as I've made a short video about Cape Verde before, I'll make sure to put the link in the comments. But Cape Verde is no slouch. Of recent years, they've done very well at the African Cup of Nations. Let me see if I can pull up how they qualified. Cape Verde was in a group that had Cameroon in it. Cameroon, not historically for sure, but also currently, right, with the likes of Mbelmo, with the likes of Andre Onana, of Anguissa. That is a fire team. That, yeah, it's pretty remarkable, really. But there's also teams like Angola, which have World Cup experience, which were in the group. So for them to top that group and only lose one game in qualification is incredible for Cape Verde. But what do we want to talk about with Cape Verde? Cape Verde was, for a brief moment, the smallest country to have ever qualified for the World Cup. I will talk about who beat them to it about a month later, last year, towards the end of the video. But Cape Verde, the fascinating thing about Cape Verde, oh, by the way, also interestingly, the likes of Nani of Portugal is of Cape Verdean descent. Cristiano Ronaldo is even part Cape Verdean. So the soccer pedigree is not unprecedented entirely here, right? But the fascinating thing about Cape Verde is the archipelago was uninhabited until the 15th century. Portuguese explorers colonized the islands in 1456. So nobody lived in Cape Verde until 1456. And so there was established the first European settlement in the tropics. So even when if you wanna talk about the era of European exploration, these decades before Columbus made it to the Americas, they had settled in Cape Verde. Anyways, Cape Verde is a historically important, fascinating space because nobody lived there as recently as the mid 15th century. But also it is an important site of disruption as far as we talk about the birth of the modern world. Next up, we have Cote d'Ivoire. Cote d'Ivoire played a fantastic game on Sunday, in which they actually won for Africa's first victory of the World Cup. Was them defeating Ecuador 1-0. We watched that game I was at my sister's house. It was a good time. So yeah, they're in Group E. They have Curacao to play against. So as far as predictions go, Ivory Coast should be going through safely, probably as a second place team here. If they do what they're supposed to do against Curacao, then they'll have to play Germany. But what's interesting about Cote d'Ivoire, or as Anglophone speakers say, Ivory Coast, Ivory Coast, Cote d'Ivoire is home to the largest church building in the world. Completed in 1990, the Basilica of Our Lady of Peace of Yamoussoukro has an exterior of 30,000 square meters, or 320,000 square feet. A giant of a building. Next up, they haven't played yet. They made it through the playoffs. The last time they were at the World Cup was in 1978. There's a famous Ilunga video that I spoke about as well, a clip of how their experience in the 1978 video went that I'm going to share. At the time, it was viewed as some sort of ignorant soccer move, but that may have been like racist minds talking about African players at play. When the real reasons came out, it was a far darker story than people had given it credit for when they were laughing at it. I'll share that in the comments. I'll share that in the description as well. But the DRC, right? At the last time they were at the World Cup, they were called Zaire. They've also been called the Congo Free State. Earlier on, they were also called Belgian Congo. Right? So this is a place that's had several different names. Indeed. But what is fascinating about the Congo is the Ishango bone, the world's oldest version of a calculator, was found in the DRC at a place called Ishango. It is over 22,000 years old. 22,000 years old, predates farming by close to 15,000 years. So that is very early for humans at the time to have any version of what looks like a calculator, indeed. But also, interestingly, Kinshasa, the capital of the Congo, of the DRC, is the biggest francophone city in the world, bigger than Paris in population. Number one is Kinshasa in the Congo. Number two is Paris. Number three is Montreal in Canada. And number four is Abidjan in Cote d'Ivoire, which we just spoke about. So Kinshasa is the biggest French-speaking city in the world. Next up, we have the Pharaohs, Mo Salah, Omar, Mamouche, and them. That's Egypt. Egypt. Egypt has won the most African Cup of Nations in the history of the tournament, right? They actually played their first game yesterday that they drew with Belgium. Indeed, and they're in Group G with New Zealand and Iran. So we'll see how they play. The whole group right now is tied at 1 point each because New Zealand and Iran also drew. So what's fascinating about Egypt? Well, you already know Egypt as being one of the centers, I tell you, of the birth of human civilization. We talk about the pyramids, we talk about the hieroglyphs, we talk about prototypes of the 365-day, 12-month calendar. It was all happening. Egypt is the site of the only remaining monument of the 7 ancient wonders of the world that is still standing, the Pyramid of Giza. In El Giza, of course, has stood the test of time. But something that also fascinates me about Egypt that you may not know is that the first battle recorded ever, the first battle somebody sat down to write about a battle in history with reliable, detailed accounts is the Battle of Megiddo in 1457 BCE, fought between the Egyptian Empire. This was the era of the Middle Kingdom, I believe, led by Pharaoh Thutmose III and a coalition of Canaanite city-states. Megiddo, the Battle of Megiddo, between the people of Canaan and the Egyptians. Megiddo, what does that kind of sound like to you? It is the root of the word Armageddon. So you can see how it played into Judeo-Christian beliefs and how it's influenced our worldview today. When we talk about a big battle that will end all things, we call that Armageddon, right? So the first battle ever, if that would be the last battle, the first one was recorded was actually the Battle of Megiddo, documented by a military scribe named Tijaneni. The Battle of Megiddo offers a uniquely detailed look at ancient military logistics and tactics. Incredible. Egypt, man. Let's see how they do. Ghana, the Black Stars, man. The Black Stars of Ghana famously made it to the quarterfinals of the 2010 World Cup before our man Asamoah Gyan missed that penalty against Uruguay. We will never forget that. One of the most epic games of the FIFA World Cup. It's a game that I will never, ever forget. Never, ever forget. He qualified in a group with, let's quick take a look here. They qualified in a group that had Mali, which is a very good team. Madagascar actually finished second. They put up a good show. But yeah, Ghana was clear favorites. And they're through. Antoine Semenyo and them. What's fascinating about Ghana? Ghana continues to be on the front end of many things that are promoting Pan-Africanism. One of the things that we can talk about is the fact that as the colonial era began to end, Ghana was the first sub-Saharan African country to get its independence from a European nation, getting that in 1957 from the British. At which point Kwame Nkrumah, the president of Ghana, as well as a prominent Pan-African figure, would announce that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it is linked with the liberation of the rest of the continent. It is also a place where the great Pan-Africanist, American Pan-Africanist W.E.B. Du Bois spent a lot of time and eventually died. Morocco, if you're talking about first, next up we have Morocco. In fact, their record here. Oh, by the way, I didn't say this about Egypt because I also have a few notes here about their records in the World Cup. So Egypt was the first ever African participant in the World Cup in 1934. They wouldn't play again in the World Cup until 56 years later in 1990, but Egypt was the first one. Now Morocco, I'm talking about here. Morocco has set 3 different records in the World Cup for Africa. Morocco drew in 1970, right? Drew in 1970 to give Africa its first point at the World Cup. I believe that was a game with Mexico. Do I have it here? I think I have that information here. No, they drew with Bulgaria, indeed. The reason I mentioned Mexico, you'll see why a bit later. But in 1986, Morocco also became the first African team to reach the knockout stage after they finished on top of a group that had England, Poland, and Portugal. Oh my God, that is a stunner group. They wouldn't be back in the knockout stages until 2022, but they came through like a house on fire. And on their way, they became the first African team to make it to the semifinals, scalping along the way Belgium, the mighty Belgium, Spain, recent World Cup champions, and who were soon be European champions after that. Portugal, recent European champions, and with the likes of Ronaldo in their lineup. So they became the first ever African nation to reach the World Cup final. So what I'm talking about here is also two firsts, but these firsts are actually not soccer related. Morocco, way back in 1777, Morocco was the first country to acknowledge the United States, right, the rebellious colonies, as an autonomous nation, and they authorized American ships to pass safely through the Atlantic Ocean. Furthermore, Fez, Morocco, Fez, is where you can find the school recognized by the Guinness World Records as the oldest higher learning institution in the world. The University of Al Qarawin is widely recognized as the oldest university in the world. Founded as a mosque in 859 AD by Fatima al-Fihri, it was later added to Morocco's university system much later, in 1963. But in 859 AD is, Morocco, fascinating space. I'm almost done here, guys. The game beckons. Nigeria is the most popular... Oh, wait, what? They didn't make it? Oh, damn. All right, so no Nigeria then. Senegal. I'm repping, even though I'm from Zimbabwe, I'm just really a big fan of Senegal. I also have a song named Demba Ba, shameless plug, that's coming out in a couple weeks, so I'm excited for that. Senegal. Senegal is pretty decent. It's one country that people are really riding with. The African champions. Well, you guys would know the controversy with Morocco and Senegal having played in the final of the AFCON earlier this year, with Senegal emerging winners on the day, but there was some kerfuffle during the match. I've done videos about this. I'll make sure I add those as well to the description box. But yeah, Senegal is there. I think if Morocco is the highest ranked African team at the World Cup, I think Senegal is second. Made it, famously, right now they are playing France. Their first match of the 2002 World Cup as well. So 24 years ago, I remember watching this. I was in Form 3, in high school. I remember watching this game that day. Beautiful game. Senegal won that at their first attempt at the World Cup, and with France being the colonial masters, and also France being the defending champions and the defending European champions. Top tier just to have lived through that. And they made it to the second round at the last World Cup as well. So let's see how they do this time around. But you would think a nation of such pedigree, soccer or football is obviously their most popular sport, right? After all, football or soccer is the most popular sport in 90% of the countries out there, with a few exceptions of maybe the US, Canada, maybe India. But actually, no. Senegal's most popular sport is lamb wrestling. Although soccer is perceived as a national sport of Senegal, the grand sport of them all is wrestling. When a major fight is held in Senegal, over 70,000 spectators flood stadiums to cheer on their favorite wrestler. In January of 2019, for example, the wrestlers Modolo and Balagaye at the fight of the century at Dakar's Senghor Stadium. So I'll put some visuals on the screen for you so you can see this. It's really remarkable to look at. And just to think, because it may even give shades of like sumo wrestling, but in the mud, but it's more technical. Soccer is not even the preeminent sport in Senegal. Lamb wrestling is. And then finally, as far as the African nations go, Mzansi for sure. I've been in a few videos recently. I was interviewed twice initially to talk about the xenophobic wave in South Africa right now. Then recently to talk about why a product of that why African fans seem to not be rooting for South Africa against Mexico at the beginning of the tournament a couple of days ago, in the opening match of the tournament. Something that is not typical, by the way. I want to get this clear because I saw some people say, like, oh, history will remember this. But you know that the reason why this is happening, right, it's not typically like this. Typically, all of Africa roots for all the African teams. And South Africa, for a long time, has been a darling of the Pan-African community. People are reacting to a moment right now. I don't want to get too much into that. This is a feel-good video. But South Africa, fascinating. For a while, banned. During the apartheid years, South Africa was banned from participating in things like the FIFA World Cup, as well as the Olympics and other things. So a lot of debate around that. Then they were, as apartheid ended in the 1990s, they came back. And in 1996, right away, won the African Cup of Nations, right? Their first attempt. Winning, after having won the Rugby World Cup in 1995, and I believe they won the Cricket World Cup at the beginning of the decade as well. But after that, then they made it to the World Cup in 1998, and they did okay, even though they got eliminated in the first round. They didn't embarrass themselves, except for Pierre Issa. Cheers. Then they hosted the World Cup, the first African country to ever host the World Cup, and as of now, the only African country to have hosted the World Cup. But what is fascinating about South Africa, so much is fascinating about South Africa. But I'll talk about this. The world's largest diamond was discovered in Premier Mine in Pretoria, South Africa, on 25 January 1905. The 3,106 carat stone weighed 1.33 pounds. But speaking of economic might, South Africa is also the biggest economy in Africa, with an estimated gross domestic product GDP of between 400 and 480 billion dollars. That puts it ahead of Egypt, which is 390 to 430 billion. Nigeria is third. Algeria is fourth. Then Morocco is fifth. Indeed. Oh, sorry about that. South Africa wasn't my last country to talk about. The last one I'm actually talking about is Tunisia. Tunisia, old school Carthage, man. Very fascinating place. Also has a record in the World Cup. The first, that's what that Mexico reference I made earlier was about when I was talking about Morocco. I actually meant to talk about it in terms of Tunisia. The first ever win in the World Cup by an African nation was in 1978, 3-1 versus Mexico. Tunisia did that. You wouldn't believe it because they have actually had a very fascinating record in the World Cup since then, in which they qualify all the time. You know, I don't necessarily mean literally all the time, but they qualify routinely. They qualify, it seems to me, way more than Egypt qualifies, way more than Algeria qualifies. They always seem to be there, right? I wonder if I can quickly find here Tunisia at the World Cup over the years. Okay. So, think about this. I started watching the World Cup 98. So they were in the 98 World Cup, the 2002 World Cup, the 2006 World Cup, then they missed 10 and 14. But then there were the 2018 World Cup, 2020 World Cup, 2022 World Cup, and 2026 World Cup. So they are always there. Such is the way of Tunisia. But you don't want to hear all the soccer stats. You know these already. What you want to hear is the fun facts. Well, Tunisia, first of all, Tunisia is the region that the Romans referred to as Africa, right? The province, because that was part of their Roman province. So that province, they called it Africa. Now there's debate on where that name comes from names like Berber names for the region, like Afari or things like that. But in any case, the term Africa was coined by the Romans, but initially it referred to Tunisia. Then it spread to mean the rest of the continent. In Tunisia, speaking of that Roman era, El Jem is one of the most ancient yet best preserved Roman ruins in the world in Tunisia. It was built in 238 AD when present-day Tunisia was part of the Roman province of Africa. Built for spectator events, El Jem has a capacity of 35,000 people. The building is also famous for being among the largest amphitheaters in the world. So, who knew that to get a true slice of life in the Roman Empire to this day, right? El Jem in Tunisia might be the place to go to, indeed. So that was all the African nations I wanted to talk about in particular. But a quick run through of other countries that are relevant to the Pan-African community. Haiti, right? Haiti played a fantastic game. They ended up losing 1-0 against Scotland. So that was just a good vibes game. But Haiti, you already know about the place of Haiti as the only formerly enslaved nation, as far as the transatlantic slave trade goes, that rose up and actually emerged as a sovereign nation out of a slave rebellion. So fascinating. And the story of the Haitian Revolution bookmarks the era, or that, the Enlightenment era, with things like the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Haitian Revolution, because in many ways those slaves looked at those Toussaint Louverture, Dirty Bookman, looked at the promises of life, liberty, and these things, and said, like, wait, what about for us? A fascinating tie into to soccer, though, tying in the revolution, is that Haiti feature the Polish flag on their FIFA World Cup kit as a tribute to the Polish legionnaires who deserve. So Napoleon Bonaparte sent European troops to suppress the uprisings in the late 1700s, early 1800s. And in 1802, right, some of those Polish people who were there saw that, wait a minute, this is BS. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't right. In fact, the slaves here have a righteous cause. So around 500 Polish soldiers joined the struggle for independence in 1802 and were later awarded honorary Haitian citizenship in recognition of their support. The Polish soldiers refused orders to suppress the Haitian struggle for independence, according to reports, instead declaring that the true adversaries were the forces of oppression and choosing to join the revolutionaries. Right? So after Haiti's independence in 1804, founding leader Jean-Jacques Dessalines included a special provision in the 1805 Constitution permitting the surviving Polish soldiers to own land and be integrated into the newly established country. Fascinating tie in there, indeed. So that's Haiti. Who else is there? Curacao is another island nation, right? It made it through the CONCACAF, another Caribbean nation. Curacao, bar none, the smallest country. Remember how I said for a while Cape Verde was the smallest country? But Cape Verde seems like a giant compared to Curacao. Cape Verde is around 500,000 people, thereabouts. Curacao has not half, but closer to a third, if not less than a third, of that population. I actually thought it was around for Curacao. Panama is a fascinating country. Panama is in North America, of course. It's a Central American country. Well, not North America, sorry, Central American country. It should be, in many ways, like El Salvador and Honduras and Nicaragua in ethnic makeup, right? But if you've seen the team and if you just know Panama, it's a very black nation, right? It's a very black nation. And not just black in terms of the enslaved descendants who were in those parts, but primarily because if that was the case, then it would be mainly just like Spanish names and so forth, right? Because that's who colonized that space. But the fact that I shout out to one of my favorite couples of all time, both Panamanian, Kendra Davis and Deshaun Roberts. So they have names like that, which are more reminiscent of Jamaica and Trinidad, right, of the British islands. The reason for that is when they were building the Panama Canal, it all comes down to the Panama Canal. It's more recent history than that. The 20th century, right? In the 20th century, when they were building the Panama Canal, 1904 to 1914, when the U.S. took over the project from France, it needed a massive labor force. So it recruited heavily from Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago, and other parts of the English-speaking Caribbean. And hundreds of thousands of Caribbean workers came over, especially Jamaican and Barbadians. Then eventually a lot of them stayed and forming large Afro-Caribbean communities. So there was already an Afro-Panamanian identity over there from the slave descendants, but what developed at this point was an Afro-Antillean identity as well to go along with it. So that's why that number is elevated, why Panama looks more like a Caribbean nation than its immediate neighbors. We did Panama, we did Curacao, we did Haiti. Brazil, the most, Brazil, one of the biggest countries in the world, the most successful country in the history of the World Cup, having won it 5 times, compared to Germany and Italy, who are sitting on 4 each. Brazil, you know Brazil, but Brazil is also has the biggest Afro descendant or black population outside of the continent. And that was just worth mentioning, so I just wanted to mention that. That's Brazil. That's the last country I'm talking about right now. I've already spoken way too much. I hope you guys are enjoying the games. Drop your favorite facts about each of these countries in the comment section here if you want to engage. Please share the video, like it, subscribe if you haven't already. I've been having a lot of fun with this World Cup content. As you know, I talk about a lot of different things here. We get heavy. We talk about heavy political things, heavy historical things. But we also talk about music. We talk about soccer. We talk about just things that I'm interested in that do with the Pan-African community. And this was the video I wanted to make this time. And I shall now watch the rest of this game and be editing as I do it. Cheers.